Hi, I'm Gene Cavassis. You know, around here I'm starting to find that we are plugging in cell phones all over the place. I have got cables running everywhere, and I even thought, okay, let's try to get them into one like strip stick of charging. That's a mess. So then I bought a USB charger to put them all in. That really isn't any better. So what I thought would be fun is to create the old and the new. Take the design of a vintage old telephone and make it into a unique charging station that will hide all those unsightly cords, make it easy to have one central place to charge your phones, and then on the front shelf make a cordless charger as well. So let's get started. I'll be using a 1 by 8 by 6 foot piece of pine. The back will be 22 inches, the front door 18 inches, the sides will be 17 inches, and the bottom and top 5.5 inches. We'll rip those two pieces at 3.5 inches, and then the last part will be the shelf, which will be 5 inches. So getting started cutting all of our material, using a miter saw, I'll just take my time and get my cuts and make sure they're as straight as possible. After getting my cuts, I'm going to take those two pieces I had mentioned and I'm going to rip those at 3.5 inches. I left the two pieces still together and we'll cut them after. So using the miter gauge on the table saw, I'm going to go ahead and cut the 5.5 inch top and bottom piece. Adjusting the saw blade to a 1/2 inch height, I'm going to now set the guide at 3/4 of an inch and make a cut in the bottom. Now that should be able to clean this out, and I'm going to go ahead and set the guide now to 1/4 of an inch and run my material through that way. This will make a decent joint for the box. I know there are smarter and better ways to cut that kind of a corner, so do not necessarily follow my way. That's just the way I got that done. After my pieces have been cut, I'm going to set them together real quickly, make sure that they're all the proper size and that they will line up on the back. Looks like it'll be fine. So now I'm going to make a pattern to cut the top piece out for the back. So taking a piece of paper the width of the board, I'll fold it in half and draw half the shape that I want. Once I have that, I'll take the scissors and just cut this material or the paper out, and that makes the pattern I'll need. All I have to do now is set it down on the wood and trace it out. Now cutting this material, I'm going to use my bandsaw, but you could also use a jigsaw if you don't have a bandsaw. It may take a little bit longer, but it's still very doable. I'll also use the bandsaw to cut out the bottom corners, and using just a roll of tape, I'm going to make a pattern for the shelf. You know, I want to make sure you line that up properly, and once I have that, I'll cut that out as well. Once I have that cut out, I'm going to set up and go ahead and cut that as a 5-inch piece. Setting the jigsaw table on a 45-degree angle, I'm going to come back and run that through, and that's going to give me the angle I need so that the front shelf leans down from the front of the vintage phone. I'm going to set this down just to check on the angle of that shelf, and then I'm going to line that up and cut basically a decorative shelf brace underneath. I'm just kind of eyeballing this and cutting as I go. And once again, I'll use the bandsaw to cut my shape out. Now I'm going to take the regular 3/4 inch thick wood and I'm going to cut it in half. That's going to give me 2 of the shelf brackets. I'm going to take a piece of 1/4 inch scrap wood and cut this out to make it basically, I guess you'd call it, the pencil ridge for the shelf. Now I've got the back, the doors, the 2 sides to the box, the top and the bottom to the box, the shelf brackets, and the shelf. I think we've got all the parts cut. I'm going to spend some time sanding all these pieces down. Here I'm using a oscillating sander that I've had for a while. It works great. I even did a review on this. I'll put a link in this channel if you want to see more information on it. The sanding, is something, it doesn't take a lot of time, and you'll probably want to put some hand sanding effort in this as well. Now I'm going to select the router bit that I'm going to use for the edging. I made a quick box jig so that I could also cut the square channel that's in the front using a half round or round bit and using basically some wood to block out the wood or the square shape that I need to accomplish this. I also did a experiment on the back side to make sure that this would work, and it did just fine. I'm going to trace the charging disc that I picked up onto the shelf, and then using the router I'm going to route that out about 1/4 inch deep. Now I'm just freehanding this and taking my time. You could probably come up with a jig, but I didn't feel I needed one for this, and it seemed to fit fine. With a little bit of hand sanding, it'll work great. Now, taking the side pieces of the box, I'm going to need to cut a 1/4 inch groove about 8 inches up from the bottom. This will make the shelf that your cell phones are able to sit on for charging. Once I establish this, I'll need to set the depth on the table saw to about 1/4 inch and cut my grooves in. I can usually do this with 2 passes to get the even 1/4 of an inch. Then after cutting the second one, I realized I cut it on the wrong side. I cannot believe I did that. But hey, I don't want to go down and buy another board just because of that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my groove on that side, and then take a piece of the scrap wood I have left and cut a notch, and I'll cut this out on the bandsaw and cut it thin enough that I know I can wedge it in there, and if it fits, I'll add a little glue in there, tap it down, and sand it away. It'll work fine. I'm going to now go ahead and cut the shelf, and I'm using a piece of 1/4 inch MDF scrap that I had sitting around. You can see my plug that I've put into that wood piece. It'll be fine when I sand it off. Making sure my shelf fits okay. I'm now going to want to take and measure off 4 slots that will be cut into this shelf, and this is going to allow the charging cables to fit up underneath so that they can connect into your cell phone. I'm now going to start assembling the box and gluing this all up. Because I want to have everything dry quickly, I'm going to use Star Bond CA glue. This is a thin glue. It's like a super glue, but it bonds well with wood and really makes your projects move a lot quicker, and it holds incredible. I'm using an accelerator that you spray on. You just set the board down and hold it into place, and it activates within seconds. I'll put a link to this product down in the description below the video. I'm using a speed square here to help make sure that the corners are good and straight as I'm setting each of these. It really only takes a few minutes to get this all aligned and set up the way you want. Looks like we're ready to start sanding. Now I'm going to come in utilizing a bench sander and just start kind of working my corners down and also flushing that screw up I put on the side. I'll also use it to sand up that pencil stop, and using that same Starbond glue, I'll glue that little piece on. Now I'm going to go ahead and line the box up to the back of the foam and just tracing around it with the pencil. And because I'm kind of wrapping up the day here, I'm going to go ahead and use wood glue because I'm going to clamp this and just let it stay overnight. So I'll just kind of set my glue on there, smear it into place, and then set this down and make sure it's aligned. Now, you want to be careful because the glue has a tendency to want to slide around with clamps. I've heard from another video, I like to make stuff, they said if you sprinkle a little salt on top of that, it helps to keep it from sliding. I haven't tried that, but it may be worth trying. Now I'm going to take a little warm water and a rag, and I'm just going to wipe around the edge of any of the excess glue that is squeezed out from the sides. I'll do it on the inside too. The next morning I take those clamps off, and it looks like everything stayed in place. The shelf fits well. I think we're ready to cut where the hinges go. I'm going to just use a sacrificial board and set that, clamp it to the side to help me stabilize, as I just use the router to cut out a little less than a 1/4 inch down so I know that the hinges will sit flush. I can clean up those corners with a blade and those will fit fine. Now I'm going to use some carpet tacks to put underneath the hinges for the door side, and this will help me to align exactly where the door is going to go. I just push down on those, and it just kind of puts some dots into the wood so that I can then pre-drill my holes and go ahead and install the hinges. Now I'm going to go ahead and mark where I want that shelf on there, and I'm going to put a piece of painter's tape on the top, the bottom, and even the sides, because I'm going to once again use the Starbond glue and some of the accelerator, and I just really don't want any extra to get on the wood. It'd be tougher to sand that off. I'm using the same glue for the shelf supports, and remember, when you're using this you have a very short time window, so you want to make sure that you don't move this stuff around. Try to get it right your first time. I think this part has me the most concerned about any of it. I need to drill a small hole or a pilot hole through here so a power cord can get through. Because of the angle, I think I need to drill it from this side. I think I'm just going to have to kind of eyeball this and try to get it as close as I can. I'm a little nervous with that. Marking the center of where my hole's going to go and just carefully drilling on an angle. And even as careful as I was, I still blew out a couple of pieces. But luckily, I was able to use the Starbond glue to set these two pieces back in, and once they set up and a little sanding, you can't tell. Now I'm going to start staining. So I'm going to lay it down using a foam brush and just carefully take my time and spread it all around the box, and even doing the same to the front door and shelf as well. Pine is a soft wood, so it soaks in pretty quickly, and you can come back with a rag and just kind of wipe it down and get any of the drips or any of the dark spots out of it. So while the stain is drying, let's start on some of the other little pieces that will complement and finish that phone. I picked up a couple of inexpensive funnels from the hardware store. They're black plastic, and I think they'll work great for the earpiece and the mouthpiece of the old phone. So drawing my lines on these, I'll take it over to the bandsaw and do my basic cuts. I think that's going to work great for the earpiece. Using a 2.5-inch hole saw and some 1/2-inch MDF, I cut a ring out, and then a smaller hole saw that was 1 3/8 to cut the ring out that would go in the receiver part of the phone. I'll go ahead and mark this one and cut it out with the bandsaw as well. Now, using some scrap 2x4s, I'm going to use that same 2.5-inch hole saw, and I'm going to cut 2 circles out that I will use as the bells for the phone. I'm also going to use some more of those drop-off pieces of the 2.5-inch and make the ring piece for the bottom of the ear receiver. I'll take this outside because the weather's decent and start using the sander to start turning and just curving the shape of the bells with the sander. There may be some easier ways to do this, but I just took my time and just rounded them off, and also used it to sand off some of the other pieces. Using some more of that 1/2-inch MDF, I'm going to cut out a kind of a cross pattern bracket that will hold the mouthpiece in place. So sanding it down and then using a smaller piece glued down at a downward angle, this will hold the mouthpiece into place. I'll take that and these other pieces. This will fit inside the earpiece to help support the top of the earpiece, and then I also cut out another piece that I'll glue to the bottom that will also help support the earpiece, and I can glue those into place and then spray paint the receivers and the mouthpiece black. Using some 1/4-inch thick PVC that's picked up from the hardware store, I'm going to cut a strip that has 2 1/4-inch holes cut at each end. This is going to be cut out, sanded. This material sands really easy, and I'm going to make this the part that holds the earpiece on the side of the phone. Using a heat gun, PVC bends real easily. I recommend you wear some gloves to help keep from burning your fingers, but you can use the heat gun to start getting the shape you want, and I basically just shaped it till I could fit it around the earpiece. I then just slid a pencil through the 2 holes to help keep it aligned, and using some PVC cement glue that they use for plastic plumbing and a clamp, I held the 2 pieces together and let them sit for a few minutes to dry. Then I built out of the same PVC material a butt plate that this receiver will fit into. So sanding it down and putting a bevel edge to it, I'll come back and take the hook part and just round it off, drilling a hole and basically fitting that right down into the plate. That will be glued in with the same PVC glue. Now I'm going to start building the crank for the other side of the phone, and with that same PVC I'm going to cut out the shape of the crank and just kind of form it with the sander a little bit, round it off some, and get the basic shape put together. I'm going to glue a couple more pieces of scrap to the base of it to help make that handle part of it look better. So by gluing that material on, and after it dries, I'll be able to come back and shape it into a round looking handle. I'll build another base plate like the other side, drill that to fit, and then I pre-sunk a couple holes in that and put a short screw on one side because I knew you wouldn't be able to reach it with a glued in crank into that piece. So now I'll take these PVC pieces for both sides and I'll go spray them gold or a brass color. After the gold or brass color's dried, I'm going to take some flat black paint and just paint the handle or the crank part of that and let that dry for a few minutes. Deciding where I want it on the side of the box, I'll go ahead and mount these. And using some short wood screws, I'll pre-drill and then set those into place. I'll later come back and touch those up with the same gold paint. I'll drill a small 1/4 inch hole up here. This will be for the phone line that comes out to the receiver. And now, eyeballing it, but basically coming about the same distance down, I'm going to drill another hole on this side to install the fake crank. Looks like this is going to work fine. Make sure my shelf fits into place still. And we can start assembling the door back on. I also picked up a magnetic latch that'll help keep the door closed. This is Montague, one of our other cats. He always likes to come down and help. So now I'm going to locate where the bells are going to be mounted. And using a 1/4 inch bit, I'll go ahead and pre-drill the holes for this. Then using a 1/4 inch bolt with a washer, and a nut, I'll set both of these in place, and this will help me to keep the bells off just a little bit from the front of it, and then I'll bolt them on with a acorn nut on the front, which kind of gives it a decorative look. I'll go ahead and mount the receiver bracket, and I had sprayed that black along with the receiver and the mouthpiece. Now I'm using a Varathane spray polyurethane that is actually a water base because I didn't want the fumes down in my shop. Now it works fine, but it sprays on pretty thick and kind of milky, but it seems to settle down fine. Now I created a set of water slide decals, and I'm just going to pick one to the size I want and cut out the shape. Now I have a whole video on doing water slide decals. I'll put a link at the top of the video here if you want to watch a whole video on how these are done. After cutting it out, I'm going to take some double stick tape, just hold it down on top of this table, and then using some Rust-Oleum clear coat, I'm going to give it a light coat. This will take about 30 minutes to dry, or an hour. Once it dries, you can now take this. Using a bowl of tepid water, you now can take the water slide decal, set it into the water, and let it sit in there and soak up. It usually takes it probably about 2 to 3 minutes. What will happen is the water slide decal itself will start to remove itself from the back paper. So taking a little bit of this water and rubbing it on the surface of the wood, you can now set your water slide and gently slide the paper out from under it, but you're now, because of that water, still able to adjust it to exactly where you want it. You can now just gently wipe it down, pushing the water out from underneath it. Now I'm going to use some Rust-Oleum chalk smoked glaze paint. Now I've never used this before, so I'm kind of curious, and you just kind of dust it on, and it's a darker color, almost like a really diluted black. And you just kind of spray it around the areas that you want, and after you've sprayed it on, you can come back with a rag and start kind of wiping the surface back off. What you're going to get from that is all of the lower places in the wood, dents or crevices, are going to still hold on to that color, and it's going to give it kind of a worn antique look. So it gives you plenty of time to kind of allow the paint or whatever that glazing is to kind of sit on. You've got some workable time in there, but I'm really liking what it's doing to the surface, and you just kind of keep wiping it, and if you don't like it, you can spray more on until you get the finish you like. It worked really well on the gold crank handles and bell as well, giving them almost a patina effect. Then after it dried, I came back with that water-based clear, which you have to shake the whole time to spray to seal everything up. Okay, so we finished building the basic phone. I put a water-based spray clear on this. That's going to work fine. Was able to do some of the antiquing around it. I'm happy with that. So now we need to move to installing the charging pieces of this, which is real simple. So I picked up a 10-port USB charger that I thought would be absolutely perfect for this job. One small flaw in that, and that is that this charging port that's going to sit here, the wireless charging port, requires a speed charger or a quick charge that's of a different voltage type. So I did have to pick up a charging port. It's just a single charging port quick charger that is the same brand and the same that meets the standards of what this needs. So I'm going to use a smaller charger. Now this has 4 ports for which will still handle the 4 phones. Now this is going to work fine for what I need, but it's just not as pretty of a configuration. This is kind of like a Chargenstein thing. It's not near as clean as using this, but it's still going to work. So I'm going to move forward on it. But it's something for you to think about when you're putting this configuration together, how you're going to make that work. So now, using a few sheetrock anchors, I'm able to secure the phone case up to the wall. So now it's all hooked up and ready to check out. It's easy to pull out, install your phones inside the cabinet, or closing it, you can simply just set the phone on top and it automatically charges. You know, this was really a fun project, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you have any comments or suggestions, please put them in the comment section down below. Check out some of these other videos, and I'll see you soon.